In this episode of On Their Terms, I have a chat with Erick Alvarez. Now, I've seen him around for years, but I've never actually sat down and had a conversation with him. And he's one of those people that everyone knows of, but very few people know in detail about how he got to where he is and the kind of things that he's working on now. But the topics covered, we actually did quite a range. We cover the misconceptions about sales training and why most people get it wrong, and how health challenges in his life have led to a complete mindset shift and a complete life shift in general. And of course, we talk about martial arts and how those principles apply across to business strategy and sales. But one big topic is the real relationship between time, money, and creating leverage. And there's one quote that was covered in this. So sales is literally a natural conversation towards an outcome. There's no need to overcomplicate it. And I think that is a perfect summary of everything we cover. And it cuts through the typical business advice that you would see from most people, as in this is the only way, this is the way it has to be. And it actually drives towards sustainable success. You're a bit of an interesting character because I have heard so many different things about you, things that you do, things that you've worked on, people you've worked with. But I've never actually seen you speak or articulate yourself. You just seem to have a presence that everybody knows about. But I haven't had the privilege of experiencing per se.
Yeah.
So what are you working on
Well,
at the moment?
yeah. So here we are. So yeah. I mean, right now I got my sales agency, 1% closers. So one side of it is full DFY sales teams. The other side of it, I get used to having a mic right here. The other side of it is placement of closers as well. And then we have the funding offer as well, which is part of essentially the sales agency. But that one's pretty unique and it's cool. It's pretty exciting. So that's kind of the main thing I have going on right now. I'm doing a little bit of a bigger push in regards to personal brand, getting more content out. I've been doing a lot more posting on the stories, and then I have content coming as well for the feeds, short forms, doing more podcasts, YouTube videos, etc. Just working out some of the back end edits with the right editors, timestamps, getting everyone in line so we can really make a solid push. So that's
Mm.
really what we got going on, man.
So Colombia, how long have you been
Yes.
there?
Actually been here since 2019. I don't know if you want the full backstory or not.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I mean, pretty much, I'm not Colombian. I don't have any family out here or anything like that. Pretty much where it came from was I did my first year of college, or some people, depending where in the world you are, call it university. I did a study abroad in Spain, in Valencia, Spain. And prior to that, I actually went to the same school. It was a private school, graduating class of about 100 kids. And that was in Miami because I'm born and raised in Miami, grew up there, went to the same school 14 years of my life. So from kindergarten all the way to graduating class. And it's a very interesting environment I came from. I mean, I was friends with like Sammy Sosa Jr., Sammy Sosa's son, the baseball player. Lil Wayne's, Birdman's son came in my school after Katrina hit, which is like related to Lil Wayne. Matt Damon's daughter went to my school. Darius Kasparaitis, the hockey player's daughter, was in my class. I mean, I went to school with some like very wealthy kids. So I'd probably say, we're like maybe a little above average or middle. But I mean, for me, where I came from, I was going to school with kids that like their parents are in mansions making millions and millions of dollars, right? So I always felt like the poor kid in my class. And it was funny because I also played basketball year round. So after school, I'd go play basketball and I was basically in the hood. So I had with those kids, I was like the rich kids. So it was a very interesting dichotomy on both sides. So anyways, coming from that environment, I had a very specific perception of the world and self-image as well. I was not good at talking to new people. I was socially anxious, not the most confident. I wasn't a weirdo by any means. Like I was like decently popular, but I wasn't like the most confident person either. And I was very, very shy as a young kid. I remember when I was very young, my dad even called me Mr. Antisocial at one point because I just wouldn't know what to say to people. We'd be at family events and I'd be like, what do I say? Like, how do I interact with these people? I was only comfortable and confident talking to people that I knew for many years because of that. I didn't have a lot of experience talking to new people.
Mm.
So, long story short, I do a study abroad in Valencia, Spain, and I'm literally the only kid from Miami in this entire, class of kids. People from Nashville, Tennessee, California, Connecticut, Boston, Georgia, all kinds of places, and that was a really big culture shock for me. And to me, I was like, they call me like the Miami kid, which is like to me was so weird because I never knew what that meant. But now that I've matured and I've traveled more, now I see Miami is a very specific place. I call it its own country because it's very unique in that regard. So that was really the culture shock to me. But I also took that time. I first got into personal development around that time. I was exposed to the book, The Four Agreements.
Mm.
My dad introduced me to that book many years before, but I never actually read it until I went on that trip. And then it was after my first semester. I had certain things, I don't remember exactly what happened, but it got me to see the world differently and want to start a journey of self improvement and being like, oh wow, I can actually change my self image. I don't have to be the person that I thought I was. That I honestly just didn't like, to be honest. I was not happy with who I was. I was shy and like introverted, but I didn't want to be. I wanted to be more social. It was not a preference. It was more of like I had limiting beliefs. So, that book opened a lot of my eyes. I mean, my first tattoo right here says Dream Master came from that book directly. So it made a pretty profound effect in my life. Read that, read The Alchemist, read The Power of Now. That really really shaped my worldview and got me to just see things differently. And anyways, long story short, after that whole experience, I was very focused on just getting out of my shell and becoming a new version of myself. Kind of like I started life again, to be honest, had a second chance. So after that whole experience, I'm traveling around Europe. I've been to all kinds of places, really, really cool experience. It's super easy to travel once you're in Europe. And it just gave me that itch to where now I wanted to live around the world and to travel more. So my goal after going to college was that I wanted to live around the world for a few years and travel before I actually settled down and stuck in one place. And this is before I even knew about online business or any of that stuff. This is 2015. Fast forward to end of 2017, early 2018. 2017 was literally the worst year of my life for multiple reasons. Had health issues. One of them was that I was essentially, my dad's been in the supplement industry for 40 plus years, and I was given by a trusted source a product called SARMs, which at the time there was not a lot of research about that. And I told the guys, like, look, man, I don't touch steroids, nothing unnatural. Like, he's like, oh no, man, it's all natural. It's gonna help you enhance your natural
Mm.
stuff, this, that, and the third. It's all good. I trusted the guy so much also because my dad even took it. And my dad doesn't touch any of that stuff. My dad's an older guy,
Mm.
he's in his 60s now. This isn't that long ago. It's probably in his mid 50s around the time. So, he even took it. So I did a month on, month off. Everything was fine. Did 2 months on, came off, and I was all messed up hormonally.
Mm.
I didn't know this until probably 7 to 8 months later, which was the worst part. And I'll cover that in a second if you care for me to go into it. But I had low testosterone and high estrogen as
Mhm.
a 21-year-old male. So, and I'm in college, supposed to be at my peak of testosterone, right? And I went to a school called FSU. It's a party school, right? Like people had fun. And I wasn't in school really to learn, right? I was there for more of the experience. Yeah, I kind of learned, but I knew classes. I never wanted to get a job. I knew either when I was younger, I played basketball, I either wanted to go to the NBA or I was going to be a business owner. Because my
Mm.
dad's a business owner, my mom's a real estate agent. I didn't even know that real estate agent is really sales. I didn't really know what sales was, to be honest. I just kind of knew how like this word. But I knew I wanted to at least be a business owner if I couldn't make it to the NBA. And I was too short and I couldn't jump high enough, so that didn't pan out, right? So yeah. So anyways, at that time, just getting my thought process back.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, please.
So the Psalms that you were on, do you remember what they were?
I don't.
Mm.
That's honestly a little bit of the scary part. To this day, I have no idea what it actually was.
Mm.
I don't even know if it was SARMs or something else. It messed me up pretty bad. I mean, that year also had, the symptoms were literally this. I had chronic fatigue. I could sleep 10 hours and I'd be exhausted. I
Yeah.
had like short term memory loss. We can be talking right now and I'd just be so out of it that I'd just be like, wait, what are we talking about?
Mm.
I had depersonalization, which literally felt like, I'm in my body, but you ever been like just really out of it? Maybe you didn't sleep really, really well, or maybe like in the partying days, you went out, you drank, you didn't sleep well, you just feel out of it, right? You're not even like in your body, kind of just
Mm.
like there, like watching yourself. That's how I felt 24/7.
Mm.
I had severe depression. I wouldn't say I was suicidal, but I never got to that point, but I could have if it went on long enough. Let's put it that
Mm.
way. I had crippling anxiety to the point to where I was even scared to leave my house to go to the grocery store because I might have an anxiety attack. Like to the point where like not like oh I'm nervous kind of anxiousness, like real anxiety to where you get tunnel vision, my throat is tightening up.
Mm.
I had a couple occasions where I thought I was having a heart attack from when it was really just an anxiety attack because my heart starts racing. You know, you kind of start going a little bit like tingling in the arms a bit. Very interesting moments of life. So you know that was quite interesting.
It
Would you like me
was
to pause?
what you said about the derealization, the depersonalization. So back in probably 2013, that was when I started to really lose my hair. I was young, and I
Mm,
remember I had a doctor that was a friend, and there was something. I think it's either called Propecia or finasteride, and he's just like,
yeah,
"Oh, just take this tablet. You're good. It'll just keep your hair." And I was, "Oh, yeah, cool." And I didn't realize, and this is why I'm so cautious now on anything that I take. I didn't realize how quickly it crept up on me. And I just remember I was sitting at the gym one day and I was looking in the mirror, and it was like this film was in front of me. It was like I was there, but I wasn't there. And I went back to him. I was like, I don't feel right. It took
yeah,
me 6 months until I was speaking to a friend who was a physio, and I was just like, I don't feel right. I'm stressed. I'm anxious. I feel like this thing. And he said, "Have you started any other medications?" I said, "No." And I Googled it, and I found these forums of people that had been on it for 5, 10 years and no one had pulled them up on it. And that feeling of depersonalization, that derealization, you don't
yeah.
realize just how amazing it is to be present until that's taken away from you. And
Oh
it
my
took
god.
me another 6 months after that to normalize. And I mean, everything was just super strict, super clean. My diet, there was nothing out, like even ibuprofen, Panadol. I wasn't going to touch anything. And yeah, it took me 6 months to get back to normal. So that feeling that you had, and then mix into that the low test, high estrogen as a 21-year-old male, that's horrific.
Yeah, man. I won't even get into like the sexual effects, but it does affect your sexual organs. You can imagine as a 21-year-old in college, you're freaking out.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, man, it like you already know what it's like. It's literally the worst thing ever. I wouldn't even wish it on my worst enemy. Um, you know, all things happen for a reason. You know, I guess I won't say I regret it. I mean, I if I can go back, I would not do it because I don't think there'd be any long term health effects. I didn't do it that long, and I've
Mm,
been very healthy. My testosterone now. I mean, I had it tested a couple months ago, and I'm full natural completely.
mm,
And I was in right 867, which is about twice the amount for my normal age. So we're good now, but man, the worst part, and maybe you can relate to this, was that 6 month period where you don't know what it actually is. That was the scariest to me because I'm coming through off of, I did a year of study abroad. I felt like I just kind of, here's what messed me up a lot mentally too, was that I felt like I really made big leaps of becoming the person I always wanted to be. I was more
mm,
social. I was getting out there. I was the bartender for, we had something called an American night. And I was offered to be the bartender. So, I was like the guy serving everybody drinks. We're having fun. I was in my party phase back then, man. Lots of alcohol, lots of drinking, waking up in bed the next day, like, what happened last night? How did I get
mm,
here? Very, very bad path. And it's funny because 2017, two things happened. One, that happened, and I literally thought I was going crazy. And I didn't tell anybody about this for over 6 months. I kept it to myself and I started detaching from everybody, my friend group, and no one really checked on me. And I realized who are my real friends.
mhm. Yep.
And I had a moment that I was it was a game day party with some friends. We were indulging in some substances, nothing hard, nothing crazy, but I was partying. That's just who I was back then. And I had a moment to where I had like this really like this voice in my head because I would feel bad, then one day I might feel normal again, and I'd be like, oh my gosh,
Mm,
I'm back to normal, and then back to where I was, and that was just like messing with my head, that cycle, and I kept kind of pushing it off. I didn't really want to acknowledge it to be like actually a bad thing because our natural instinct is to run away from pain and run towards
mm,
pleasure. So I had a moment to where I had a voice in my head that said, what if you're schizophrenic? And I didn't even really know what that meant. But as soon as I heard that voice in my head, it was like something not even myself said it in my head. I had this just feeling of just terror, just pure
Mm.
terror all over my body. And I had to leave instantly. I was like, hey guys, I gotta go. I left. I remember I went to my car. I was sitting in the parking garage and I haven't told my parents about anything that's been going on. Again, no one knows. I've been fully kept keeping it to myself. And I just called my mom and I started breaking down crying. And I was
Mm.
like, look, this has been going on, blah, blah, blah. Like, am I ever going to be normal again? Do I have a mental disorder? Do I need to go to a psychiatrist? Like, what's
Mhm.
happening to me? Like, the scariest feeling to this day, the scariest moment of my life. And it's funny because right at that time, I actually went and got my hormones tested because my mom had a natural doctor that she used before for some other hormonal stuff that she had. Um, so I went in and got it tested, and it's, oh, your testosterone is low, your estrogen's high. And I was like, I don't even know what
Mm.
that means, but what's going on? So I didn't really know what was happening. She's like, oh, look, it's all right. Like, this is what it is. You're getting your natural supplements. It'll be okay, blah, blah, blah. I was like, all right. Then the next day, same thing. But my dad was on a trip. He travels like half the year. So I called him and I was like, hey, this has been going on. I broke down crying again. It was like this rock bottom moment. So, after that, I took some natural supplements. About 3 months went by. I felt a little bit better, but I was not myself still. And I
Mm.
just could not live the rest of my life not being myself. So I remember I was on a trip with my parents in Georgia, staying in like a wood cabin in the woods. Well, cabin in the woods. And I'm there alone with my parents. There's no outside distractions, barely any Wi-Fi. There's really nothing but me and my thoughts. And on that trip, I just realized I'm like, man, it's been 3 months and I just feel a little bit better, but I'm not normal. I need to solve this thing. And I'm 21 years old. I refuse to take testosterone replacement, TRT, or anything
Mhm.
unnatural to cure this. I do not know if it's possible to even do this without it. I don't know how, but I'm going to figure it out. Long behold, did some research, stumbled across a guy named Christopher Walker.
Mhm.
He did some like promo stuff with a guy named Kino Body, who which back then I was really big into his fitness programs,
Mm.
that whole thing. And he had a program to naturally optimize your testosterone. He had his own story about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. There's another person
Mhm.
in the world that has dealt with something like this. So I got his program, followed it. I was doing all the lifestyle stuff. A big part of it is micronutrient deficiencies. So I made sure I was on point with my micronutrient deficiencies. I was eating the right foods, the right diet, working out in the right manner. Lots of compound lifts. There's actually an equation along the lines of like the further the distance of the lift, for example, like a deadlift versus a curl, right? A curl is a short distance, but a deadlift's a larger distance.
Mm.
So stuff like that actually will help trigger more testosterone, um, et cetera, et cetera. So a few months later, probably around like I say February, March of 2018, I actually felt normal again. But prior to that too, the second thing that happened was on the New Year's of 2017, I was my last time ever partying crazy, right? It was a New Year's party in Miami. All my friends from high school were seeing each other again, other friends from college. I was hanging out with some guys that also, were a little more reckless at the time. And I had a moment that night where I drank so much that I was gone. I was blacked out. And I remember my last memory is me chugging a bottle of it was Grey Goose vodka at this pregame party, and that was it. I wake up in my bed the next day. Now, what happened between then and I wake up in my bed the next day
Mm.
changed my life.
Yeah.
Um, Long story short, we're at a famous club in Miami called Bodega. Don't even know how it happened to this day. I literally don't even know. But all I remember is that my next memory is me standing in front of the club, screaming down the street at someone about fighting, and I have blood dripping down my shirt, on my pants, my shoes. And what happened was I got, I guess, cheap shotted. I got punched without realizing it in my nose, and it broke my nose, completely
Mm.
destroyed. Like tilted like this, like pushed out, like it was all messed up. Gave me a deviated septum. At nights waking up, I couldn't even breathe. I was like suffocating because of it. So had to get all those things fixed. But yeah, that was the last time that I partied like that and took myself to that point. And the reason why I took myself to that point was stemmed back from those limiting beliefs and lack of confidence because I felt like I needed to do that to be cool, to fit in, to
Mm.
socialize, to get out of my shell. So it's a little bit of the backstory.
I'm
Now
going to give you
shifting
a bit of
gears.
a just quickly on that. I'm going to give you a bit of a perspective shift on a couple of things. So, one, I don't think it's the worst thing that you did that. And the reason is I have a lot of people that I know that are further along than me. And they didn't do that. They didn't ever party. They didn't ever have that point where they thought, this is not the person that I want to be. And they follow the path. They do the right thing. They go to college. They get a good job. They get married, the house, the car, the kids, the dog, then the new car, then the new car. And they get to this point, late 30s, early 40s, sometimes 50s. And they think, I never let loose. I never did this. I need to do that. And I was, I'll say it was a gift. About 3 to 4 years ago, I was working with a company and they worked with successful men who did all of the right things. They had everything that everyone wanted, but they were miserable. They weren't showing up as who they needed to be, what they needed to do. And the theme that I saw across most of them, not all of them, is they had this realization of I never took time to figure out who I am, what I want to do. I never partied, I never let loose, I never traveled. So I don't, whilst yes, it's part of the villain story in that it created you and who you are and what you want, I don't think that's something that you should look back on too negatively because ultimately, like I have the same thing. I I don't want to drink. I don't want to party. I don't want to do any of that because I well and truly did that and I had my fun, but I hit a point where it was just I don't want to do this anymore. This sucks. I'm sick of being hungover. I like waking up feeling sharp, on the ball, and actually working towards good stuff.
Yeah,
So I don't think you should be too hard on yourself with regards to that as part of the story because ultimately it got you to where you were and you I can say pretty confidently you're probably not going to hit a point where you want to go back to that.
for sure. Yeah,
Mm.
and I don't regret it at all.
Mm.
Like you said, I'm actually happy that I did. That's why I can talk about it openly. I have no
Mm.
shame about it. I even have, I guess, in a weird sense, a little bit of pride because I think, going from that, like you said, it got it out of my system. I'm not going to
Mm.
be the guy. I'm not the guy. And I haven't been the guy for many years that has to do that. In fact, growing up in Miami, I was going to clubs at 16 years old. That's kind of what we did on the weekends. So by the time I was 21 years old and allowed to really do it, I already got it out of my system. I was kind of
Mm.
over it for a long time. So yeah, it was fun, the times that I had it. But like you said, it's one of those things that, is done and I don't really have any urge for it.
The other thing as well you mentioned, I think people get they romanticize what it's going to be like to get in a fight when they go out. And I think everyone just pictures this beautiful overhand right comes in like the movies and they just spread out like this. I don't think most people are prepared for what it's actually like. And there's the easiest way to explain it is no one actually wins in a fight, especially if you're out. Because worst case scenario, you hit them, they go down, they hit their head on something, and then you go to prison. Best case scenario, you or neither person gets hurt, which is not the outcome of the fight. And I think a lot of young guys in particular, they just love the idea, or they go out and seek that out. You you ended up with a
Yeah.
broken nose and a lot of mess on the back of that. And
Yeah.
you do a bit of boxing now too, don't you?
I do. So actually, from what I've heard from people that were around, it wasn't even a fight. It was like I was trying to go to the bathroom, and it was a group of like 12 like big dudes, and I was gone. I have literally zero memory of this, anyways. All I remember the next day was kind of a sensation of me like kind of like floating around. So I thought I got jumped, but I came to think about it later. It was probably me being pulled by the bouncer out of the club, but it wasn't like a fist fight. Like apparently it was me trying to go to the bathroom. They wouldn't move, and because I was in my certain mindset, I just started walking through them, like just bulldozing through them.
Mm.
And then I guess one of them just cheat, just hit me.
Uh,
So yeah, there is no defense, but yeah, nowadays I do box. I do a little bit of not Muay Thai, a little bit of MMA, which includes some Muay Thai and other stuff, but primarily boxing nowadays.
mm. What's your favorite? What do you love the most?
Boxing for sure.
Yeah.
Just feels beautiful, man. It's just the sensation of it. It's called this the sweet science. Just feels good.
Mm.
It's like an active meditation, like a dance. And I actually grew up doing kung fu since about I was like 5 years old. So I had kind of a foundation for it, but a lot of it was mainly forms, not a lot of actual like real world combat. We
Mm.
did some of it, but not to the point where I was very confident with it. But I also learned some Tai Chi through that, which I think was also profoundly helpful in regards to sales, and a lot of principles apply. Very interesting stuff.
Mm. So Tai Chi is the kind of free motion style of things, yeah?
Yeah, it's a stuff that generally the old people do.
Yeah.
Very slow,
Yeah. They
but
all
it's
look
very,
pretty chilled.
yeah, it's very interesting because every movement has an application behind it. But the thing is, most people don't get taught that application because it's actually very lethal. Like there's a movement where you're like this, and then you're here, and it's just like you're doing this slow movements.
Mm.
All of it's using energy, but this movement right here is me grabbing your arm on top like this, and my hand under your elbow and breaking your arm. So it's this right. Then it's me take. I don't remember exactly the other application of it, but yeah, it's very cool because every single movement, it has to be precise. Before you can take a step, for example, you must shift all the weight to your right side, your right foot,
Mm.
empty the left foot, and then you step with it, heel, ball the foot, toe, and then you move full. You put all your energy or all your weight onto that foot, and then you can move the other foot. So everything's extremely intentional. And when you must move from a center axis. So your perineum,
Mm.
and which is basically the center of the bottom of your torso and then the top of your head. So a straight movement. So everything you do when you move like an axis in a singular motion, in a single spot, and you always keep this in the center of your body because you move by shifting your weight. So you don't go like this and lean over, right? You're always centered, and you always have to be grounded. Well, we already know how that can apply to sales, to be centered and to be grounded, right? And the
Mm.
whole movement and the motion behind it is that you do not fight force against force. You channel the force by turning on your axis and then redirecting the force. So, same thing with sales, right? You don't push back,
Mm.
you use finesse. You take what they say and you redirect and you rechannel it in another direction.
Mm. I'm thinking about that jujitsu terms, and the coach that I work with, he talks just a lot about push pull, as in you push
Yeah,
them back a certain direction, the force is going to come back towards you, and then that's when you find a lot of opportunities. And even if it can sometimes be sequences, or you chess moves 4 to 5 steps deep, push that way, and then they come back, and then you go to actually take the leg, and then they sit back as well, and then you transition to something else. So hearing it explained in the context of Tai Chi, it's universal.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's super useful. 'Cause when I was learning MMA, just jujitsu and wrestling tied into it, I actually got pretty good at that stuff pretty fast. Because like when my coach would explain things to me, it just made sense, right? Like around your hips is basically the center of your weight, so you want to move them from their hips, not from further up, because they're going to feel a lot heavier. And my
Mm.
coach is probably like 135, and he's throwing me around. I'm probably around like 180, 185, and he was throwing me around easy. Just whooping my ass.
So what
So
135? What's that in kilogram? 135.
kilogram. So multiply. So divide that by 2.2.
So my coach, he's in the 65.5 kilo division. So he's he's not big. And what's
Yeah.
funny is he is the smallest coach that we have within probably 300 kilometers, the smallest guy, and he has the big boy gym. So I'm hang on, I'll convert it. So I'm about 218 at the moment. I'm usually sitting, yeah, I'm usually sitting a bit lighter, usually 3 or 4 kilos lighter. But the gym
Yeah.
that I'm in, I'm not exaggerating. The all of the big guys come to the gym because we had two guys at the start that were between 119 and 125 kilos, which is like 262 to 275, and they are really good. And then another big guy came, and then another big guy came. So I went from usually being the biggest person in the gym. Now they joke around about me being the little big guy. Uh, these guys are just mammoths, and it's awesome to really have to be pushed in that gym. But then you've got my coach that's sitting at like what is that, 135 to 140 ish.
Mhm.
He just beats everyone up. He's
Yeah.
unbelievably good. And then take that another level. We had a lady come in. She was maybe 51, 52 kilos, which is no, not so, which is about 112. And she won double golds at ADCC. and watching her, again, levels and levels above that, it's just crazy what someone can do with that level of technique. And yeah, it's impressive.
Yeah. Life is very interesting, and I relate this back to sales, but my kung fu teacher was like a second father to me growing up. He's actually from Ethiopia,
Mm,
and he studies with like real like Chinese like martial artists, real kung fu, like from the source. And I remember there was an exercise that we would do, and I don't think I was there for this day, but there was one day. So next to his school, growing up, it was right next to a car tint shop. Right, it was like kind of in the where like warehouses are. So it was one of the warehouses with the school, and then right next to it was a car tint shop. The guy was always super nice. I remember, growing up from a very young age. And there was one day he was doing a car tint for this guy that was like an NFL player. And the guy was like, my kung fu teacher's name was Dennis, or is Dennis. And he was like, hey, Dennis, show this guy the thing. So the thing was basically this demonstration that he would do to basically show the power of relaxation and channeling and redirecting energy. So he would stand in one single place, just ground his feet, ground the bottom of his core. Like another principle, for example, from Tai Chi is heaven and earth, or heaven and earth. So basically, the idea is that the bottom half of your body digs into the ground. You ground yourself, you like a tree root, right? You
mm,
plant yourself into the ground, but then the top goes up towards heaven, right? So it's like this opposite directions. You're pushing in both directions to ground yourself. So the bottom half of his body is digging into the ground, but the top's completely relaxed, and it's moving that same principles of moving on your axis. So the whole point is that you try to push him over and make him have to step out or like fall and lose his balance or his grip. He literally had an NFL guy pushing with all of his force, like I'm pretty sure the guy was like a linebacker or something like that, trying to
mm,
push him, and he could not move him because he was pushing him like this, like spaghetti. He's like, or maybe that's not the right term, but like Jello, just like you push here and it's like there's nothing there. It's just like completeless relaxation and movement, and you can't push against anything that doesn't push you back, right? It's like you try to push here and just boom, door opens, and now your direction is going somewhere else, but you're still centered, right? Which just shows the power of also relaxation, which we also know is very important for sales, right? To
mm,
be relaxed, to be present, to be in the moment, focusing on the person that you're with, not to have that tension. When you have tension in your body, you have tension in your mind,
mm,
and now your mind isn't empty. So the same concept with fighting, right? Like Bruce Lee says, empty your mind. When you empty your mind, you can be present. You can read and adapt to your opponent in real time. You can allow your instincts to take over because they're going to be significantly faster. A punch can move 4 times faster than the eyes can see. So if you think about what you're going to do, the fact that you even think, I learned this in boxing too, if you even think about it, you're already hit by the time you think about it. You have to be able to react because that time gap is the difference between literally could be life and death,
mm.
right? So that's always a principle or a concept that I always had from there that I've been able to bring over to sales, and obviously you learn that from the right mentors and the right people that teach that stuff, and it's so true.
100%. Absolutely. And so there's one thing that I've noticed when working with some more experienced salespeople. And when I say more experienced people, typically in their 40s and 50s, they've been doing this for a long time and they want to work with me. But the conversation that I have at the start of every session is, when were you selling at your best? And they're going to map that out. And then what changed? And they have gone from just decades of sales experience, number one in the leaderboard in any team that they're in, but then all of a sudden just kind of ticks down and they can't seem to replicate it. They're in their head, they're thinking about it. And what happened the majority of the time, now this is not every occasion, but what happened the majority of the time is they were put into a space. And the thing I've noticed is particularly more with women, because I think them, and I'll say this, I don't understand what it's like to be a woman in sales. I say this to all of them. I said it to someone last night. You've stepped into a man's world essentially, because sales is predominantly male. They all know this. They've all said this. And the thing that I notice, and I have to say back to them, is, what were you doing then that made you great? Because you learned all of these things that other people did, things that works or worked for them, and you've thrown away what was getting you sales, which was being present with that person, asking them questions about what was actually going on, being yourself, because what you learn is there to amplify what already makes you great and what makes you unique. And then as soon
Yeah.
as they get in that thought process of like, oh, what's the next line? What was that thing they said? What was this thing that I read? They can't sit there and they can't be with that person. They can't actually have that conversation. And if nothing else, some of them use the sales stuff we go through. Others just, they get their confidence back because I've reminded them, or at least shown them, what about them makes them successful and what about them makes them great. So that what does Alan Watts call it? Uh, Excessive thinking. And there's another guy, I watch his stuff sometimes, very profound, and he talks about the mental agitation. That's it, that we all seem to be experiencing. I think that's just a net negative on anything that you want to apply it to.
Yeah. I mean, first off, kudos to you because you're a great coach, right? That is the way you coach someone. You don't tell them how to think, you teach them how to think for themselves.
Mm.
I think that gives somebody power. And that's what you did. You asked them the right questions because one thing I've learned from a mentor of mine, Bob Proctor, right? One of the OGs is he says this, right? Nothing can be created nor destroyed, right? It can only change forms. So all the answers that we seek are already here. We already have all the answers. We just need to tap in. So that was a really big paradigm shift for me because I was a mindset. I used to be a chronic invest into programs and not really take a lot of action, but invest because it gave me the dopamine of I'm doing something, the novelty,
Mm.
the shiny object syndrome, which is great. I did go through a lot of the things, but I wasn't really implementing them all the way for various reasons. But it made me realize that I don't really have to seek the answer outside of myself. A lot of the times, I already have the answer within. And if I just ask myself the right questions, I can come up with the answer myself. So,
Mm.
actually, one of the times that I was performing at my top in sales, I was going through the Bob Proctor program. It's called Thinking to Results. I actually have to this day my goal card right here from the program I have in front of me all the time with it's called a C type goal, which is basically your big goal, the goal that scares you, that's outside of your current reality, right? So every single morning I go through it and then I just journal and write down how can I increase my close rate today? How can I be a better closer? How can I ask better questions? Or what questions can I ask that will allow me to get X, Y, Z? And just think. And I would do it first thing in my day for my first 30 minutes. No looking at my phone, no distractions, no even talking to anybody. I just go right into it, fresh, empty mind, and boom, it's like I just tapped in and answers just pouring in and through me. And another saying that I learned from a guy, he's a preacher named Dr. Miles Monroe. He's incredible. And one thing he said is that innovation is not the creation of something new. God already created everything, right? And I'm not talking from a religious standpoint, whatever someone's belief is, that's fine. I just use God as an example. I personally believe in God. But he said, nothing, same thing, nothing can be created nor destroyed. Everything that we need is already here. Even technology, all these things that are created off the back of things that were already given to us naturally. So innovation is not the creation of something new. It is the formulation of things that already exist in new ways. That is what innovation is. So we already have everything. It's
Mm.
already here, right? And stemming back to your other point of emptying the mind, right? And not thinking of what you're going to say next or what to do next. Another lesson I had that was a big moment for me was from a guy named Jason Capital. He's the one that introduced me to this online world in marketing, sales, etc. But it stemmed from something else. I actually learned a lot of the principles of people, psychology, communication, and really started to fall in love with it through dating and learning about game and how to, talk to women and all that stuff. And it's funny because I used to be really good. I had a situation when my girlfriend from high school broke up, and then multiple things, just like bad things, started happening. Bad friend groups that I had, like other things I don't need to get into details with, but it just kind of gave me it destroyed my confidence at that
Mm.
time, right? And it blocked me for many, many years, got me in my head. It got me thinking I wasn't good enough. It got all these things happening. It took a while for me to get out of, And I was seeking these answers. I was investing to, like RSD and all those guys and their programs and going through it. And I read the book, The Game, which introduced me to that whole world and all this stuff and the canned lines and whatever. And I always thought I never felt fully in alignment with it. But the problem was because I had all these like lines to say, it got me so in my head that I started overthinking things even more. And it got even worse. So one of the guys when I was in 2017, when I was coming out of that whole situation with the hormone stuff and kind of getting myself back to normal and confidence, was I gravitated towards Jason Capital, and he was teaching the whole concept of status. So he has a book called Higher Status, right?
Mm.
And that book to this day is one of the best books I've ever read because it's so true. It talks about subcommunications and how there's always status games at play and how we see other people and body language and tonalities and eye contact, right? All these subcommunications, the honest signals, as he calls it. And I was so into it that for my birthday that year, I didn't even ask my parents for a present. I said, hey, he has this event in person in Newport Beach, California. I want to go to this event. Can I just have that for my birthday present? And they did it. And I remember at that event, I was so shy. I was going through my situation still, and I was so anxious that I could barely speak to people. And I was literally just shaking from how nervous I was and sweating profusely. And I remember we had to do this. There was something, I asked him a question one time, and I was like, hey, man, like, I'm learning all this stuff, and my problem is I just get so in my head, like, I feel like it's messing me up. And I was a basketball player growing up. So was he. He said, look, when you're in practice, you think about, practicing basketball, you think about all the moves you're doing, right? How you dribble the ball, the way you move your body, the fakes you do, X, Y, and Z. But when you're in the game, you don't think. You just play. You have to trust yourself and trust your natural instincts. Because if you start thinking, back to the earlier example with fighting too, you start thinking, well, now you're going to lose because you have to be able to react quick. It's real time. It's real life. And that's why I also call sales as a sport. When you're in the game, when you're in a call and you're about to change somebody's life, you can't be thinking about what you're going to say. You have to be present. You have to be able to read them. There are so many times I've done sales calls, call reviews for my sales teams, and they're like, man, I don't know why this deal didn't close, this, that, whatever. I'm like, all right, cool, let's start from discovery, right? Like, he gave me this objection at the end, it didn't close, this and that. And they would ask, I remember one time specifically, one of my guys, one of my closers, asked a specific question to this guy, and the guy gave him an answer with his words. That was what he wanted to hear, but his body language and his tonality and the way that he said it and the uncertainty and the way he said it gave it all away. I was like, dude, that's where it happened right there, the first 7 minutes of the call.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, oh man, I missed that. And I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, because you're thinking about what you're going to say too much. You're caring about yourself, not the person in front of you.
Mm.
You're not being focused on them and it's emptying your mind because you have too much noise in here that you're missing what's actually happening in front of you.
I've got one very, very good, very similar to that. So I was working with one guy, and he was selling to a crowd, like very experienced investors, very, very experienced, and he was having trouble connecting with them. And they knew as soon as he turned on anything sales, they're just like, ha, I know what you're doing. No. And one thing that we did is we switched it around, and instead of trying to talk about anything pain related, it's about where do you want to go with this? What does success look like? That sort of thing. And he gets on the call with this guy, and this guy had done a lot of experience, a lot of investing, and he gets him talking. Fantastic. Just he was relaxed, and then you could see when he started thinking. And he said something to this guy, and just before he started switching on that thinking, and he just and the guy's like, yeah, the purpose of this, I want to create that generational wealth. And then he missed that, didn't think about it, and then the next question was, okay, so let's pretend you did decide to work with us. What does success look like? And I said back to him, I'm like, you just missed it. What does generational wealth mean to this guy? Is it, I want to be able to provide for my family like my family gave me and I lost it, or provide for my family that I never had? I want my grandkids, who are Timmy, Tammy, Zoe, and Zach, I want them to be able to have a life that I never got because I grew up here. Where would you go? What does generational wealth look like to you? I said, that was the whole call right there. And you missed it
Yep.
because you were thinking too much. Happens all of the time. And even the big reason that I use AI so much is because we as humans, we're so closed in. We get the horse blinkers on and we only know what we know, and we're biased to look for it. And even I remember you said you were doing like a lot of training and courses and that sort of stuff. The funny thing is, we can only pick up what our senses will pick up. And I did one 10, 12 minute training with someone, put it through AI, and I read back all of the points. 70% of them I read through. I'm like, that what's going on? The AI is playing up. I went back through the video. I had missed pretty much every major point that I needed because I was thinking about the one outcome that I needed from this. I missed everything. And I think we're at a time now where we can amplify massively the courses that we've done, the information that we've done, even reviewing sales calls, because you're not looking for that needle in a haystack that you or one person thinks that they can find out. You can look at the data and it can just say, hey, you missed everything. These are all of the areas that you did. But we just get
Yeah.
caught in this path.
Yeah, there's a lot of we might go into some tangents on this, but I think you're gonna be good. They're gonna be good tangents. So I have 2 points I want to touch on. The first one is that's why I say this, like, for any closer that is, I would say, intermediate looking to go to advanced. And I've talked to a lot of guys. I have a guy that I recruited to my team recently that his highest month was about 900K. He should have hit $1 million last month, but the lead flow was down. But he did about 745K. He was pissed about it. By the way, 16% commission, six-figure take home. And
Yep.
he was pissed. He was upselling current clients the whole nine. And I asked him when I was interviewing him, I was like, hey, man, so why do you think you're so good, right? Like, why do you stand out? Because I remember it was September 9th. He was at about 200K plus cash collected. The second guy on the team was at 20K. So it wasn't just the offer. It was him. It was a massive discrepancy. And I asked him, like, dude, why do you think you're so good? He's like, man, I just talk with people. I don't follow a script. I just have a real conversation with them. And I think people miss that. We're so trained on the script or the this or the that. Now, I believe in frameworks. I believe in process. I believe in having certain language patterns you can pull out at certain times, certain sayings and analogies and stories and truisms and things you can pull out. But you can't be so robotic that you're following this like strict script,
Mhm.
right? And there's a very popular sales training nowadays that I kind of joke about, and it's great training. It's based in proper principles. We all know what it is. But it's funny because the whole premise of it is don't sound like everybody else. But the
Mhm.
problem is that people are not taking the principles of it, applying it within the lens of who they are as an individual,
Yep.
and they just mimic the other person they learned it from and not thinking for themselves. And they're parodying it. And because of that, now you sound like
Mhm.
everybody else,
Mhm.
which is the opposite of what's supposed to be. So at the end of the day, I think it's all about just being authentic to who you are and adapt things for who you are as a person. So what I always say, and I think this is some of the simplest and best advice. I don't say it's the best, but I think it's simple advice that anyone can implement, and it could help them reframe because it helped me reframe. When I first got into sales, I sucked, man.
Mhm.
I should look at my background of who I was as a person, but my first
Yep.
calls, I was that same person. I was so nervous. I was scared, literally scared of that conversation. And I remember my first like real closing opportunity a mentor of mine gave me, and I went 1 for 20 on the calls. The only person that I closed was the first conversation, and it was someone that I met back at a Jason Capital event years ago who already knew me, which is the only
Mm.
reason why I closed. Everyone else I could not close. I was not natural at this. I was not good by any means. But I look back on it and I was like, man, why did I suck so bad? And the reality is, one, I was inexperienced, right? Lots of many things. But the biggest thing was that I was getting so in my head and so nervous
Mhm.
because, first off, two things I wanted to take from them. I wasn't there to give value. So, of course, I feel nervous, right? I'm nervous because I'm trying to take something from you. All I feel nervous is I'm here to just, no agenda, just add value, just help,
Mhm.
right? I'll just be nervous about that. Who doesn't want that? Adding value. That's one. Number two was that I thought sales was this esoteric thing you do, like this thing, this act that you put on, and this person you become, and it's this weird thing, and everyone has this idea in their head when they first hear sales. What do we think about? Sleazy car salesman.
Mhm.
But what shifted my frame and my perspective was when I said, man, screw all that. And the same thing applied, by the way, to dating. When I was learning all those things, the same advice Jason Capital gave me, right? I was learning all those lines of saying this and that. The second I said, dude, screw all that stuff, it's stupid. That's not me. I'm just going to be myself, just be the best version of myself. Let me get in the gym, get in the best shape possible. Let me focus on my purpose and being the best human being and highest value person I can possibly be. I'm not focused on women. I'm just going to be the best version of myself and it'll naturally be a byproduct, right? That's when things shifted in that world, which same thing applies over here. When I stopped just trying, I said, hey, is it literally just a conversation between two normal people, just like we're
Mm.
having right now? The only thing is that we have a specific outcome we're working towards together. And that's why I started saying it's like, hey, man, sales is literally just a natural conversation towards an outcome. There's a lot of
Mm.
different issues. Say it's change, it's solving a problem, it's this and that. But in my opinion, it's just a conversation towards an outcome. And the
Mm.
outcome is figuring out whether or not this is the right fit for each other. Does it make sense? Can we help you? Can we not help you? Is it worth doing? Is the timing right? Et cetera, et cetera. But we're
Mm.
trying to solve, we're working toward a certain direction together, right?
Mm.
And I saw it like that, and I'm like, why do I need a script? Why do I need to think about X, Y, and Z? What would I naturally need to know to figure out if I can help somebody or not? Right? Now, don't get me wrong, I still write things out, I still prepare, but when I'm in the moment, I know I'm certain checkpoints that I want to
Yeah.
hit, but
Yeah.
I'm not married to how I get there. I just know, hey, I have certain checkpoints to hit. I need to know, what do you have going on right now? All right, what's the problem with that? What are you trying to achieve? Why is that important? How do you want, what's the ideal thing look like for you? What are you trying to get, right? Can I help you or not? And then from there, I can figure out, okay, cool. That's what my pitch is, right? It's custom to what the person just told me. And basically, I would just present what we do within the lens of what they said that they wanted. So if you said, hey, I want X, Y, and Z, it's important to me. Okay, great. I'm going to cover what we do and touch on the points that you said you care about. Hey, we do X so that you can what you said you wanted, basically.
Mhm.
Right. So then they're like, oh, this is for me. This is, it feels like me. So yeah, that's one thing. The second thing, back to the learning aspect, right? Of learning from mentors. A lot of problem that I see in the space is that everyone's focused on teaching the tactics, but not the principles. And one thing I also learned from Jason Capital, and that guy was my first mentor. I learned so much from him. Was the saying is this: context over content,
Mhm.
principles over tactics, because the context or the principles is what determines and creates the tactics. And if you just try to parrot somebody's tactic, again, it won't be authentic to you. It won't come out the same way. I can tell you this cool reframe, this cool saying, but like I'm using a personal story. For example, lately with the funding offer, a lot of people come in and they say, hey, I want XYZ loan, these interest rates, this, that, and the third. But the reality is they're a little bit delusional. And the reason
Mhm.
why is because they're uneducated. They don't
Mhm.
realize that this is a game for that space specifically, that you don't get what you want. You get what you qualified for. So analogy I started adopting and actually got this whole idea from Matt Ryder was truisms. I was lucky enough to be on a sales training with him for a team that I have. And he was just spitting out all these little sayings that would just convey the point so concisely and so powerfully without saying so much. And I was like, man, I love that. Like I can take that principle of these little sayings and phrases and think for myself on how I can use them for me and the things that I do. So I got to thinking, I was like, huh. And one of the things that I came up with was, look, I grew up playing basketball. I wanted to go to the NBA, but my problem was, I kind of mentioned at the beginning of this call, I was too short and I couldn't jump high enough. Well, isn't that the perfect example to explain how somebody's foul is not strong enough to get what they say they want, but they're going to get what
Mm.
they qualify for? So I started using that, and I started using it literally this week. Man, game changer. Like literally, my
Mm.
clothes were just going like crazy. And people that were hard files to work with, I'm like, no, I need this, has to be that, blah, blah, blah. I explain it like that, like, hey man, look, I hear you, but here's the thing, man. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a basketball player. I wanted to go to the NBA. Problem was I was too short and I couldn't jump high enough. So
Mm.
in this game, we don't necessarily get what we want, but we get what we qualify for because the banks write the rules. So the situation with your file is XYZ, right? And these little things, these little principles that we can grab. So our pause right there because I feel like I'm getting a little bit off the
No, I
path. But does
like
that make
that.
sense?
I like that. So it's a big thing in NLP as well. It's called bits. You can kind of, like, I think it's just that they steal that from comedy. You can have your little bits, your little turns of phrase, things that you say. And I think Eli Sanchez or Eli Wild, whichever one it is, I have a coach. My coach has a coach. The most successful people we know, they understand that. Just your little bits like that to kind of reframe the way people view things. And I haven't actually done any sales training with Matt. I've heard a lot of good things about him. I know a lot of people that have. He's been around for quite a while. But those little bits that people can actually relate to, the little analogies, if NLP is anything to, if we believe it, it basically bypasses a lot of the resistances that we have. And they're very effective. Very, very effective.
Yeah.
One of my favorite ones, I started using it probably about 3 years ago, and this actually happened. So if I have someone on the call, so I'll go through as very similar to you. I don't have a very strict process. I have things that I need to tick off, things that I need to do. But when I'm going through situational awareness, as in what's going on right now, the problems, the symptoms, some stories and examples to get them feeling it, and then I'll go a timeline. Now, if I feel as though this is going to be the kind of person that will, the kind of person that will be like, no, I'll probably try and figure it out myself, or maybe they don't want to invest. The little bit that I started weaving in, and this actually happened on a call. I just say, look, I spoke to a really, really successful businessman a couple of weeks ago. And I mean, like, he was Scrooge McDuck rich, had businesses on businesses and everything. And he said to me something that was really profound. And he said that in life, you pay with one of two things. You either pay with time or you pay with money. And he said, time replenishes, money does not. So whenever given the opportunity to save time by investing money, you always take that option. And I thought that was really interesting. But the question I think I've got for you, so I say that and I step away. I let it like just kind of simmer there. And then a little
Yeah.
bit later in the call, when we go over the timing side of things, as in what's the rationale behind now versus weeks, months down the track, they'll say, because they've already told me they've spent 5 years stuck like this. Then they'll say, I can't afford to waste any more of my time. So I want to invest in it now. And so I'm not in the same position in 5 years. Now I've tested it. I mean, so many times over the past few years. And if I remove that little bit, that's where I get money objections or time objections. And that's a true story. And even it changed the way I view myself. Like doing
Yeah.
website for a company that I'm scaling up with at the moment. And I was looking at doing it myself, and I thought it's going to cost me 3 or 4 grand to pay someone to do it. It will take them a couple of days. It'll take me a week and a half. Time versus money. It's an easy choice. And that one little bit, I don't know if I've ever actually shared that publicly. I'll probably have to write a newsletter about it now, but that's one that's done very well on calls.
It's just true though, right? It's funny because like back in 2021, I was a VP of sales for a data slash tech company. I was selling to agency owners. I was selling to high level entrepreneurs. I even sold to Fortune 500 companies, which was a very interesting experience. Very happy I had that. I even sold, and funny enough, the guy that got me into high ticket closing was at a Jason Capital event. This Chinese guy, well, Asian looking guy, maybe not Chinese, but Asian looking guy in a red suit. And his name was Dan Locke.
Dan Locke, as soon as you said the red suit, I knew.
Dude, he's on stage and these guys are in the crowd wearing suits and they're all, yeah, like so hyped up. All the speakers. And I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, what's going on here? And he gets on stage and boom, has this powerful presentation. And he closes me from stage with this whole idea of high ticket closing. So my first close was I called my dad. I'm a college kid, just dropped out of college, by the way. I dropped out in 2018. The first thing I did was straight to this event. I was studying entrepreneurship. I was the first school that had a major in entrepreneurship. So I was like, you know what? These teachers aren't
So
teaching me
you were
what
studying
I want.
entrepreneurship at college.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
not think that's a little bit paradoxical?
100%, which is why I dropped out. So,
Yeah.
because our teachers were like small business owners in like Tallahassee, super small town, right? Maybe like low six figures. I'm like,
Yeah.
you guys aren't really doing what I want to do. I knew I wanted to do the online thing. In fact, my first business idea was called the Fitness. And it was like very similar to like whole Kino body thing, right? Get in shape, time freedom, etc. And they told me my idea was stupid, actually. I actually got rejected from a business incubator that they accepted other people on. So, and I was like, what? I'm proving them wrong now. So, anyways, I was realizing like, man, I'm not learning anything of value from these guys. I was in a marketing class that was giving me the definition of what marketing is, not how to market. This is the definition of marketing. I'm like, dude, are you serious? I'm in class
Mhm.
for this? Luckily enough, I didn't take on any student debt. My parents did Florida prepaid, so it was already covered. But I still left, and I was like, it's a waste of my time. Like, I'm learning more from my online mentors like Jason Capital on the internet than I am from any of these guys. So I went to this event. Dan walks there, boom, closed me in the idea of high school closing. I called my dad. I'm like, hey, there's this Asian looking guy with this thing called closing that's XYZ. Gave him the whole little spiel. It's $2,500. Like, can you give me the money? I pay you back. And he had some resistance, some objections, overcame those objections, gave me the money, right? Closed me on the spot. I was season 4. Fast forward, this is 2018. Fast forward 2021. Um, I was actually on a phone call closing Dan Locke and his organization with Dan Locke directly on the conversation. We're selling him our AI data solution actually. So that was a very cool full circle moment.
How was that?
Um,
How was that being on the call with him? Was there any recognition of did you tell him that he got you
yeah,
into that, or?
yeah, super nice guy in the call. I thought he would be more like how he sounds in his videos, like just very like intense in that whole tonality. But he was like very upbeat, very nice. Hey, yeah, oh man, great to hear. Blah blah blah. Yeah, that's awesome. You know, um, it was actually funny though because the guys I worked with, there was a group of people, and like there's two like main founders of the company. They're older guys, like in their 50s. One of the guys, he was like a guy from the Bronx in New York, sold companies before. Like this whole group space is a joke to him.
Mhm.
So when Dan was like, "Oh yeah," after the call, like, "Yeah, we want to do it. We just need to see like 2 references or whatever." The guy was like, and he's from the Bronx, like hard, like a pit bull, hard nosed, very direct, will bulldoze over you, talk over you, does not care. And he was like, man, fuck this guy. He's a nobody. Who does he think he is? We have publicly traded companies we're talking to. Like, this is nothing. We're not going to get no references. It's a waste of our time. And I was like, damn, because I wanted to close that deal just to be able to say I did it. But he was like, no, we're not doing that. We're walking away from this. I was like, ah, come on, man. Let me just get this win for my ego. It was cool. I met some great people through that. I met his at the time director of sales, Joel Yee, who's a very good buddy of mine now, doing some incredible stuff. So yeah, but I learned through that time talking to those guys. It's true, right? It's time over money. Money comes and goes. Time only goes. You
Mhm.
don't get time back, right? Money literally is nothing. If you had unlimited amount of money, if you were a trillionaire, would you care about taking a week and a half to do a project or pay 50 grand just to get it done in a day? You wouldn't care because
Mhm.
money comes and goes. It's if I want to get really down the rabbit hole, I mean, people can look up fractional reserve banking. Money's made up. It's not even printed anymore. It's numbers on a screen. They don't print physical dollars anymore. The majority of it is money printed on the screen that when you go to the bank, basically, and I'm kind of butchering a little bit, so forgive me if I'm not perfectly on
What's it
about this,
called?
but
Fractional.
fractional reserve banking, it's basically a system in the US so where when you put a dollar into your bank, the bank legally, this is not any theory, this is all facts, anyone can look it up. They can legally loan out your money 9 times over. So
Oh,
your $1
so
just turned to $9.
fractional reserve banking is a system which only a fraction of the bank's deposits are required to be available for withdrawal. Banks only need to keep a specific amount of cash on hand to create loans from the money you deposit. So there was a credit union or whatever it was in Australia, Geelong Credit Union or something like that, and that's what actually changed a lot of the banking laws in Australia. So the problem was they were doing exactly that. They would bring in, say, $1, and then they would loan that out 8 to 10 times.
Yep.
But they went above that. And then the problem is someone, and this is how quickly word spreads. This is without social media. I think this is back in the 90s. Someone said, oh, on the back of that, they don't have our money. They're going broke. You need to get your money out. So everyone freaked out, went, oh, I need to go and get my money out. They actually didn't have it. And that
Yep.
rush collapsed the bank, and there was only a very small percentage of people that actually got their money back. But
Yep.
yeah, that once I read a story once, and it was basically like a fable and the example of $1. So basically, I paid $1 to the person here, and then they paid a dollar to the person here, and they paid a dollar to the person here, and they so basically everyone's paying off their bills with this $1, and then it comes back around to me, and it was I've again butchered that really badly, but basically the value of $1 in this story has been expanded out to $24 over the space of a day. And again, I've completely butchered that, but money as well. The The other side of things as well is I think most people have a very unhealthy relationship with it. There's a scarcity
Yeah,
mindset of it's not going to come, it's not there. I need to hang on to it, which in turn kind of keeps them stuck. But
yeah.
that's a whole other conversation.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I touched on that very briefly. I think one of the things, at least for me, that changed my limiting beliefs on money was just understanding what money is and how it works. Everyone wants to go into this like emotional thing and this and that and try to, trick your mind into it. But we're also, I believe, we're very irrational, logical creatures. We like to have logic to back things up, right? Like the old saying goes, we make decisions based on emotion, but we justify and rationalize with our logic.
Hmm.
So you want to have a logical reason to refer back to because emotions change, they come and they go, right? That's basically predicated on your state, how you feel in a specific moment. That can shift very, very fast, and it
Hmm.
does shift many times throughout the day. But if you have something logical and rational and concrete you can go back to, it's like that consistency. It's
Hmm.
stable. It's there, right? I think of it like this: the rational is the masculine energy, right? It's sturdy. It's ever the same, doesn't change. And then the emotional is the feminine energy, like the weather. It changes, it comes and goes. But you need that polarity. You need
Mm.
the masculine and the feminine, right? So for me, what it was just learning about these things of what money is and how money works and fractional reserve banking and all this stuff. And what you just explained with the banking collapse of that banking system in Australia, I mean, don't be surprised if you see that exact thing happen in the United States, especially all the money printing they're doing. Look at it. Look at 2024. I mean, 2020 around COVID. 40% of all circulating capital was printed that year. 40%. So you're gonna tell me you're worried about $1,000 when in 5 years it might be worth almost nothing? We
Hmm.
don't know what's gonna happen. What's money backed by? It was backed by gold before. What's it backed by now? The fact that we believe in it and the strength of the U.S. military. And but now you see BRICS and all these things happening in the world currencies are shifting, and the U.S. dollar is in a more compromised position than it's ever been.
Hmm.
And if money loses strength, look what happened in Argentina. Look at the hyperinflation that took place happened in Venezuela. Venezuela was um, a very wealthy country before all that stuff happened. Do you think in their mind they ever thought they would end up in that situation?
Hmm.
So what is money? Money is a fake. Money is just an idea. Money is energy, right? You transfer money to other things. Money is just a tool. It's like a shovel, right? You want to go outside, you want to dig some dirt, you can use a shovel to hit someone over the head and kill them. You can use a shovel to dig up and create life and put a plant in there.
Mm.
There's no emotional value in a shovel. There's no emotional value in money. Money is just a tool. It's a means to the end. It's how you use it. You can use
Have you
money
read the
to
book?
impact and change the world.
Have you read the book What I Learned Losing $1 Million?
I have not.
So it's about trading and investments, and
Mm,
basically this guy he lost a lot more than $1 million and families, friends, money, everything like that. But the basic premise of the book is when you're investing money, have a very clear in and a very clear out. That way, before you even buy in, you can't get emotional about this. It can't. You're like, oh, maybe it'll pop a little bit more, and you'll lose everything. So this guy had some. He went in heavy on beans or bean oil or something like that, like hundreds of millions of dollars in, and he got emotional about it. It's going to turn around. It's going to turn around. It's going to turn around, and it just didn't. And ultimately, I'm pretty sure I remember correctly that he turned it back around. No, sorry, not that investment. His portfolio over the decades to come. But the biggest thing was just money is a mechanism, and when you're trying to amplify it, be very clear, be very systematic in how you use it. And a lot of the more successful people I know, they see it as a tool.
yeah.
But I don't think that's something that they always understood. I think that's something they had to learn.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, right? Like when you're broke, and look, man, I speak from experience. I've been broke and in debt. And I mean like 100K credit card debt twice in my life. I had to move back in with my parents
Oof.
twice. One was my fault. Another one was I got screwed over, which I still take accountability for. It's still my fault. But it is what it is. And there are blessings, right? Actually, some of the hardest times in my life from a financial perspective. I mean, when I went through the hormone stuff, that was the hardest point in my life because it was health related. Which, by the way, health is way more important than money.
Mm.
Way more important. When you don't have your health and you have money, you realize how invaluable money actually is.
So one
Yeah,
thing that I was going to mention before, I thought I'll chuck that in now. So
yeah,
with time passing, time only goes; it doesn't come back. the thing that I've noticed, particularly in the past 12 months, is the compounding effect of how I've treated my body over the years. Now, I haven't been bad. There was a
Yeah.
period where I was nuts about the gym, and you're young, you don't really have to warm up, and you're doing stupid amounts of weights and everything like
Yeah.
that. The body gets sore. You don't worry about injuries. Whereas now, I'm doing at least a 15-minute warm up before I do anything. And I used to
Yeah.
laugh at people that did that. And the further along I get, the more I realize, not the more I realize, the more I understand the saying, you only have one body. This is it. You need to look after it. And then if you map out what you're doing now, whether you're eating a lot of sugar, a lot of junk food, drinking a lot of alcohol, doing a lot of extracurriculars, or whatever it is, you're not looking after your body, there's no undoing that. There's none. And I think people are starting to realize, or at least it seems as though, maybe it's just the circles that I hang in. The people are starting to realize that you only have one vehicle for this life and you need to look after it because
Yeah.
you're not just going to heal like Wolverine.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's actually funny because I think financially I could have been further along at a younger age, but I was just so into working out, man. Like I want to spend 3, 4 hours of my day at the gym in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of the day too, which probably wasn't the best idea from a financial perspective. But like I just like I loved it, man. I loved the gym. It was like my escape, my therapy, almost like my healthy drug to a degree. And it's funny because over the last couple of years, when I like really have just locked in financially, had to sacrifice a little more of my like fitness, I see the way that I feel, and as soon as I believe life goes in cycles, right? I have a certain cycle where it's like, all right, look, I gotta dial in, I gotta go to the gym like 8 p.m., 9 p.m. at night because I know for me personally, I'm not the guy that if I go in the gym in the morning, I can work in the rest of the day because I'll have too much energy in the gym. I go too hard, and I just are crash middle of the day. And also it's something weird about me. Maybe it's just me, I don't know, but my mind, like if I'm working, I see to go in that like go mode and I just work like all day just straight, really like not many breaks. I eat while I'm working, take a shake, whatever. I be, on my phone, messaging people, team, etc. And then when I'm done, I'm just like go to the gym, kind of detach a little bit, come back, do a little more work. Like before this, I was at the gym, got my workout in, came here, right? We're doing this. After this, I probably handle some business stuff. Then probably around like, I don't know, 10, 11 p.m. are like, all right, let me chill, kind of get ready to go to sleep, etc. I'm a little bit of a night owl sometimes. But yeah, there's nothing more important, man. When I started making more money, I started investing back into my health. Getting more tests done, the right supplements, different things just to optimize my health. Weekly massages, right? Make sure my body feels good and it feels right. It also affects our mind because one thing I also learned was that if you want to solve a head problem, you solve it through the body.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to solve a body problem, you solve it through the mind. I'll give you an example. Let's say your arm's broken, right? You go to a doctor. What do? All these tests, you analyze, you say, here's what we need to do. Use your mind to figure out the problem and fix it. But if you have a head problem, anxiousness, overthinking, depression, whatever it is, all these mental things, you don't solve a mind problem with the mind because the knife cannot cut itself.
Mm-hmm.
You have to solve it in a different fashion. So for me, when I was going through all those periods of depression, anxiety, this, that, and the third, when I was dealing with all my hormonal stuff, I had to solve it through my body. I got into things like yoga, bioenergetics, Tai Chi. I mean, those are the things that allowed me to get out of my head and get into my body.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I started to actually be more present and get over those problems because they all stem from me being too caught up in here. And that's the thing. A lot of people nowadays, and that's what we're trained to do. It's not necessarily our fault. It is because it's our responsibility. But the way society is programmed is to put us in our heads because we're more easily manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
They want us anxious. They want us depressed. They want us sick. I mean, dude, I can go in a rabbit hole about sickness with insurance companies. It's not an accident. I mean, the Matrix, that whole thing, like it's a system. The game is set up a specific way for a very specific reason. There are no accidents. There are no accidents in that stuff. So it's us, I'm motivated by freedom. I have an eagle tattoo right here, right? It just represents for me freedom, right? Like you said, life on your terms. That's what I was always motivated by. Time freedom, location freedom, financial freedom. Do what I want, when I want, how I want, who I want. That's always been my motivation. So, all these things that we do, taking care of our health, being in the gym, being the best versions of ourselves, that to me is an act of freedom.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't. And I think what you said about the mind and the so there's a saying that I was told, and I actually said it to someone this morning, that the majority of the time the thinking that got you into a certain situation, particularly mental, is not the kind of thinking that's going to get you out. And people think that they can think their way out of a situation that they thought themselves into. I know that's a really loopy conversation, and I read a book probably 3 years ago. It was called The Nature Fix, and was talking about the rise, and that was no the Nature Fix, and then there was another one I read about like anxiety, depression, or and mental disorders, not mental disorders, mental states, we'll say. And the biggest thing that I learned from both of those is that the solution of SSRIs and anti-anxieties and everything like that, they are not. So they weren't allegedly. I'll say this allegedly for anyone that's, I'm not a doctor. Apparently, they were designed. SSRIs were to get really troubled people out of a very bad state, but the purpose was short term. Move the needle from -10 all the way up to +10. We're still not at 100, but the point of SSRIs is to get you to this point. But allegedly, what the goal became for the pharmaceutical companies is to keep people on. And what they did is they started to figure out the longevity of these. Your body gets used to them. So there was some research, there was a lot of research done on the effects of being in nature, surrounded by trees, the ocean, whatever it is.
Yep.
And they found that, so apparently in Japan, they started prescribing people, instead of SSRIs, prescribing people time in nature. So an hour to 2 hours a week. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to look at anything. And they're one of the things that it put forward. So have you ever heard of fractals?
Fractals. In what regard?
Okay, so fractals are something in nature that are a constant repetition of themselves. So, and
Okay.
nature is made up entirely of these. So you've got the base of the tree, and then you have the branches that come out. And then on each of those branches, you have smaller branches that come out. And then on each of those branches, you have leaves that come out. But if you look up really closely at a leaf, it still has the trunk, and then it has all of these other tiny little branches that come off the side. And if you look in closer, so it's just this constant repetition of exactly the same thing. And that's what nature is made up of. So even if you look at sand, you look at dirt, you look at bushes, everything is made up, allegedly, of fractals. And apparently, so they did a lot of research, and they found that being around nature, and a big part of that is being exposed to those imperfect repetitions of everything, has a substantially more effective, a substantially stronger effect on depression, anxiety, anything like that, than SSRIs, even short term, do. It was phenomenal. And I realized if I have a day where I'm a bit stressy or anything like that, I have rainforests, and I mean tropical rainforests, about a 10-minute drive away, or a 2-minute walk that way. I just walk into just dense bushland.
Yeah.
Phenomenal what it can do. And I cannot see a reality where I would go down the path. And even a buddy of mine, he had, I was talking to him yesterday, had some issues with just some vestibular balance, vertigo things. And one thing the doctors said to him was SSRIs. And he's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And he hit a point where he was like, nah, I can't not. He's on them for 2 days. He's like, I couldn't sleep. I felt nauseous. I felt sick. I couldn't do anything. So there's a lot of things out there that, whilst they are accepted as the best outcome, they are not even
Yeah.
close.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a couple cool things you said there. So the first one was about you can't solve a problem in the same state. So I believe it's actually a quote by Albert Einstein that you can't solve a problem within the same frequency that it was created. So one of the best things you can do if you're feeling emotional or you're feeling stressed about a situation, go to the gym, get a workout, move your body, shift your state. And once you do that, you'll be surprised how naturally the answer just comes to you. One of my rules, for example, if I feel very emotional about something and I'm very it's like, oh, got me riled up, or like a problem I have to solve, or something I have to say to somebody, I actually won't say anything until the next day. I have to sleep on it first.
Hmm.
Because I'm going to let all those emotions in that moment, I have to let it die down and then approach it from a more grounded, rational perspective. And if I still feel like it's saying what I want to say, okay, then I say it, and I probably say it in a more grounded way, in a more tactical way, maybe not so emotional. We just blurt things out and it creates more problems, right? The other thing is that with the fractals, so this is why I love systems. Everything in life is a system. Nature is a system, the ecosystem, right? our respiratory system. Everything is in a system. Life works in systems. So that's why I think, I try to always think in things. It's called, I guess it's called systems thinking is like the term or whatever it is. And I think there's some really cool articles and forums out there as well that I've read a little bit about it, but to me, it just kind of made sense. It just, I think of things in systems. A system is that one part affects the whole and the whole affects the one part. Everything works together. If you shift one thing within that system, nothing's going to happen within a vacuum. It's always going to have an effect. So let's go back to how it can affect sales and things we're talking about, right? Even going in the gym, having your health on point, being in the right shape. You don't think that is going to affect the way that you show up as a person and the way that you show up on your calls? And so we know everything works in systems, everything affects each other, nothing happens in a vacuum. So every little thing that we do affects everything else. And that's why the way that we do one thing is the way that we do everything.
Mm-hmm.
Everything counts, everything matters, all the little things add up. Especially when I say this with my teams, like some of the industries you play in are very competitive spaces, very saturated. A lot of people want to jump in because a lot of money to be made in it. And I tell them, like, look, man, I have to tell the owners this too. It's like, look, this game is a game of inches. I want every single inch, every single advantage on our side because every little thing matters. I want to give us every single competitive advantage we can possibly have. So yeah, that's my little spiel on
Mm. I heard a
how
saying. I heard a saying recently, and it said that we don't rise to our goals; we fall to our systems. And I
yeah,
think that is just spot on.
yeah,
Everything I do, I break down into systems, and I think Michael Dunleavy in particular is probably sick of me talking about systems, processes, all of that sort of stuff. But I love
yeah,
it, and I like to map things out. And what you said about getting out of your the frequency, I've not heard that one before, but I've noticed that with me. So in my office now, this is where I do. This is where I get things done. I don't really create here per se. So if I need to write something or do a newsletter content or need to write out a script, do any processing like that, I grab my computer. I'll either go and sit out the back and just like watch the chickens do their thing and look at the trees and that sort of stuff, or I'll get in the car and drive a couple of minutes down the road and go to this cafe that is just beautiful garden. Like it doesn't look like a cafe. It's just gardens and there's all these big lizards running around and people bring their dogs in and that sort of stuff. If I try and sit here and do these sort of things, it's not going to happen. But if I put myself in a different situation or a different position, it will change everything. It will.
yeah.
And I think I listened to a podcast with Chris Williamson and Tim Ferriss recently. It was last week. Now, I listened to Tim Ferriss back when, like 10 years ago, or whenever it was that he started. So I've been a fan of his for a while. And they were going through myths that you learned the hard way. And one of them was, Chris Williamson said this, sitting in front of your computer is not doing anything. Sitting in front of the computer to when you're not actually achieving anything is not doing the work. You're much better off to walk away, go and think, be strategic about it, and that's so much better. And one thing, I actually mentioned this on a huddle this morning for the collective. One thing that I started doing a lot more is hang on, I'll bring it up in a second. Have you used the new ChatGPT?
The
Hey, what's
4.0
up?
or no,
Great
not
to
you
hear.
guys.
How can I help today? Sure thing.
Have you heard the advanced voice mode?
Not yet, no.
Get the app, pay the 20 or whatever it is per month.
Yeah,
So on the way to jiu-jitsu, 3, 4, 5 times a week, whenever I go, I talk to ChatGPT and I just say, this is, I'm not sure what I want to do with this situation. It might be a referral system. I learned a couple of days ago about how heat exchangers work and how like refrigeration systems work. Just I was curious. But if I'm not sure about an idea or I'm trying to think of newsletter ideas or something like that, I'm like, I just don't know
yeah.
how to structure this. I'll talk to it as I'm driving because I can't write anything down. I can't think I need to write that down because it saves everything. And I'll actually have a conversation, a workshop. And in that 15 minutes, because everything's saved, in that 15 minutes, I get so much done. It's ridiculous. Or I'll go for a walk and do the same thing. But getting out of that thinking state of trying to figure it out yourself, it helps so much.
100%, man. I mean, three things come to mind for me. One is the power of leverage. That's my favorite word, and that's been my like north star for the last about year and a half. Leverage, leverage, leverage.
Mm-hmm.
How can I get more done with the same or less inputs? Isn't that what life is about?
Yeah.
Why is Elon Musk a multi-billionaire, and then you have guys on the streets? I'm here in Colombia, right? I see people that come from Venezuela that are on the streets working in the rain at 1 a.m. trying to sell candies to carbs. I guarantee you they're working harder than all of us watching this right now. That's
Mm-hmm.
hard work.
Yep.
What's the difference? We're working with more leverage, right? And another like saying that I have now, and I learned this from someone I used to work with, was everyone says speed is king, right? Speed, speed, speed. But what happens if you go fast in the wrong direction? You go further away, actually, right? If the goal line's over there and I go 100 miles per hour in that direction, I ended up worse off than I was if I just stood still and did nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not speed is king, velocity is king. Velocity is directed speed. So you have to make sure first off you're going in the right direction, which, like you said, right, you have to take time to think strategically on where am I going. Don't just do. Make sure you're doing, but you're doing the right stuff, because doing the wrong stuff could put you in a worse off situation actually. And the other one was, no, I think I covered it.
That's it.
I think I had something else I was going to say, but it's slipping my mind now.
Yeah.
I definitely did. It's all good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've covered a lot of good stuff. And I think here's probably a good spot to wrap up. But I really enjoyed this. And thanks for taking the time. Thanks for dealing with the technical issues and being a little bit patient. But we're here. I appreciate this.
Yeah, brother, I appreciate it. It's been fun, man. I can keep going. I enjoy this stuff.
Perfect. Well, you enjoy the night and we'll chat soon.
Thank you, brother.